Hi there, I'm Beth Summers from the Wilton Test Kitchen, and I want to show you a really cool and interesting way to decorate either a jelly roll like this or a sponge cake that you can place around a different cake. This is called inlay cake design. It looks really impressive, but it's really simple to do. So let me show you how. So to start out, I have traced a pattern onto a piece of paper here. And what I did was I used this flower cutter from the 3-piece fondant cutter set. And I made them all touch each other, so it kind of actually looks like a tile design. I didn't really want it to look exactly like a flower for this, so I kind of just repurposed it. And I really like the effect it's going to give me. And then I put my piece of paper into this 10.5 by 15.5 sheet pan. And I'm going to cover that over with a piece of parchment paper. So I've cut my parchment to fit my pan. And we're going to give it a light spray with some Bake Easy. Now, I don't want any pooling of my Bake Easy here, so I'm going to take a paper towel and actually just very lightly go over it. We want just a very, very light coating. No pooling. That's perfect. Now, I have my cake batter ready to go, and you can find the recipe for the vanilla sponge cake that we're using on Wilton.com. It's there for you. And this is what it looks like. It's really fluffy, really light and airy. And what you want to do is, after you get your batter made up, work a little bit quickly so that it doesn't deflate on you, because it's all leavened by egg whites, and that is why it's so springy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to separate out about 2 cups of my batter here, and that's what I'm going to use to color for my inlay cake design. Doesn't have to be exact. You just need about 2 cups for this design. So that looks pretty good. Now again, because I don't want to deflate it a lot, I'm going to take a really small amount of this out of this 2 cups, put it into a mixing bowl, and I'm going to color this tiny little amount. I'm going to use teal today, teal icing color. And I want to just do a small amount because if I mix my icing color into the small amount, I can be really vigorous with it and not worry about deflating all of my 2 cups. And then once I get it all mixed in together, I'll add the rest of my 2 cups to this. So you can see it's really vibrant and it's really deflated a lot, and that's okay. So when it's good and incorporated into that tiny amount, we'll go ahead and we'll add the rest of the 2 cups. Okay. Now with this, I'm going to be just a little bit more gentle, and I'm going to use more of a folding motion to get my batter incorporated. You can see it does go very quickly, but the folding helps to keep the batter more aerated than if I was just stirring it around really, really vigorously to incorporate my color. So once you're here, we're going to put this batter into a disposable decorating bag, or a non-disposable is fine too. I have a number 5 tip in my bag. And we're going to fill the bag. You never want to fill your bags any more than halfway full with anything, because it keeps the batter more contained, it's easier to use, it won't come out the top on you, and we can always refill when we need to. So I've filled my bag, push it down to the bottom, and we're going to start to fill in our blossoms. And all you do here is trace. Now you're going to want to give a pretty nice thick layer of batter here. So I'm actually piping all the way in and around inside the flower as opposed to dragging the batter through. If you drag the batter through, it's going to get a little bit too thin. And then when we go to peel the parchment away after it's baked, it's going to take most of the color with it. So that's why we colored 2 whole cups of batter, so that you can actually pipe a nice generous amount. Using that tip 5 will give you a nice generous amount. And you just continue on to fill in your pattern. After you get your entire design piped onto the pan, you're going to need to very carefully slip your stencil out from underneath the parchment paper. I didn't mention before, but what I've done is I actually put a little piece of tape on the bottom side of my stencil because it's going to help me to get it out from underneath a little bit easier. And you do have to be pretty careful with this so that you don't mess up your design. But it does just slide out like that. Now what you're going to want to do is bake this for just 1 to 2 minutes to set the batter. So you're going to do that in a 350-degree oven and then pull it right back out after 1 to 2 minutes. Okay, after you've baked for 1 to 2 minutes, your colored parts are all completely set. So what you're going to do is add the rest of your cake batter over the top. You just spread it out. It's still fluffy. This is, again, why it's kind of important to work kind of quickly. You don't want this to deflate on you, and if it sits for a really long time, it will start to get really soupy. But ours looks good. So once you've got all of it out of the bowl, you'll just spread it into an even layer using a large offset spatula. So that looks pretty even to me. Just going to pop this in the oven. It's a really fast bake. It'll only take 10 to 12 minutes in your 350-degree oven. So my cake has been out of the oven and cooling on this cooling grid for 15 minutes. Now we need to loosen the sides of the cake with a butter knife or an angled spatula like I'm doing. I have a tapered spatula here, because they won't come away from the sides of the pan on their own. And that's because they climb up to rise. So definitely don't skip that step. Now I have a second piece of parchment paper cut to the size of my cake, and you're just going to lay that on the top like this so that we can flip the cake out of the pan. Just turn it over. And by using this cooling grid underneath, it gives the cake support, and it will look just like that. Now we're going to peel the bottom piece of parchment paper away. And you can see it leaves the design on the cake. So now what we're going to do is we're going to put this piece of parchment back on. And I know that sounds weird, like why would you do that? But you need to do that so that it comes detached really easily. What we're going to do now is roll the cake up and let it sit for a while. So you can actually pick the cake up like this. We're going to roll the piece of cake with both of the layers of parchment together. So just roll it up like this. Make sure it's nice and tight. Then you're just going to want to let it rest seam side down for a little while, and this is how the cake will hold its shape. So after you let your cake rest in the rolled position for a while, you can unroll it onto the cake board like this, and you'll see it kind of holds its rolled shape, and that's what you want. So we're going to take the parchment off both sides here. Actually, discard it. It gets pretty sticky. Don't worry about it. And from the other side. And this cake is really resilient, so don't worry about breaking it. It's very spongy. That's why it's called sponge cake. Just get rid of both. And now we're going to fill it. I'm just going to use white decorator icing here, but you could do anything you want. It's really fun to color the icing, or something like that. And you'll just take your icing and spread a thin layer all over the cake. Not even 1/4 of an inch, thin, thin, thin. And keep in mind that as you roll the cake back up, the icing is going to displace a little bit. And that's okay, but just think about that when you're spreading on your nice thin layer. That you don't need to overdo it, otherwise it's just going to all squish out at the bottom. Okay, so I've spread my icing on, nice thin layer. Now it's just time to roll it back up. So I'm going to start with this end here because I have my little gap. And because it was rolled already, it's really, really easy to roll it back up again. And you'll always want to put this onto your cake board with the seam down. And look at that, it's a really nice presentation. You could transfer this to a clean cake board very easily. Just pick it right up. And there you have it. That's inlay cake design. For more decorating ideas, tips, and tricks, visit Wilton.com.